It was like he never stopped going up. I mean, he jumped and just kept levitating. It's like a Super Mario double bounce. I don't know.
Takes the snap. He's going to give the ball running right side. Here comes Hunt to the outside. And he leaps for the pylon. Touchdown, Kareem Hunt.
Welcome to Mac Football Forever. I'm Alex Alvarado. That's Caleb Carter. Caleb, we are at the halfway point of the season when normally looks outside, see that there's a couple inches of snow already. Normally, this is the week where we're getting ready to end the year and just kind of decompress from football season because it's been a long year. But it's been an even longer year than that, and we still have more football to go.
Yep, and we still don't know a lot about this conference. There's a lot we do know. There's a lot to still be told. So if we're lucky enough, we'll keep finding out new stuff. So I'm good with that.
But we have 6 whole games again, none canceled so far. We're recording this pretty early on, all things considered, because normally we'll record early on in the week on like a Sunday or Monday, and then the games start on Tuesday, Wednesday. But this time, now things are changing to where, we're recording on Sunday and games start Friday and Saturday. All the games are on Saturday except for Central Eastern.
Weekend football games. Let's go.
We're going to be ignored again. Last episode, we talked about the offensive players, the top offensive players. We'll talk about the top defensive players later. But generally, it feels like the talent level in the MAC, and this is just the eye test, which is always undefeated. It feels like, and it looks like the players are just playing better this year than they have last year, which was not something I was expecting. So I know last episode you were kind of looking for surprises. I'm going to sneak one in right now before we get going on the previews. Generally, the talent level has looked pretty good.
The talent, we're seeing a lot of talent show out, especially on offense. It might be a little bit different this year to pick out the best defensive players, but that's something we're going to attempt to do. But for now, yeah, I think in a lot of ways, offenses in this conference have really risen to the occasion and haven't really looked all that bad. Quick
theory. It's because they didn't have to spoil all that time getting beat up by Tennessee on the road, getting beat up by Auburn on the road. They just went out at full strength is, whatever full strength is to those guys, and they went out and played at the level they should be playing at.
And in the MAC, that favors offenses. So I'm down with that. Makes it fun.
Speaking of being down, let's move on down the list. And
come on down.
That was a crappy transition. Still sticking with it. Let's look at the 6 games. There's Central Eastern, NIU Western, Ball State Toledo, BG Ohio, Miami Akron, and Kent State Buffalo. Can't wait to get to that one. Let's start with the Friday game though, Caleb.
So, looking at Central and Eastern, we're looking at a Central team that had itself it was a really weird game against Western last week, and I still imagine it's still thinking of itself as a potential MAC championship game qualifier. They would need a little help, obviously, but they're still playing decent football. They've got to clean up some stuff defensively, and they're probably feeling a little bit better going into the Eastern game, knowing that what they're able to do, knowing how bad the Eastern's been running football, right?
Yeah, and all things considered, they have to be coming into the year with different reasons to be excited about their respective teams. And Central, even though that they're coming off of a loss at Western, they still put up 44 points in the effort. They didn't look their best either. The Central at not their best still might be better than Eastern at their best at this point. But Eastern's playing at home. It's a rivalry game. Who knows? I don't know. I think Eastern's still – they're going to really want to prove a lot to themselves. And last year, you got to remember in 2019 how they shocked Western at home in the rivalry matchup. They're going to want to find a reason to shock Central too.
Yeah, and to a certain extent, you can you can't throw stuff completely out the window, but the whatever matchups we've seen so far with Eastern, I thought in some ways they matched up with Toledo decently. They obviously got slaughtered. So, coming into this week, I'm looking at some of the things that maybe up front might benefit, or that the Central might be better off with, and I'm thinking, well, maybe Eastern bounces back this week. Maybe they finally figured out the running game. Maybe they've got some of these guys healthy and they're not affected by COVID protocol this week. So if you're Eastern, you're at home, you're a little bit more, even more motivated for this game in all likelihood. So hoping that turns out in the form of a good football game.
Yeah, I just don't see them slowing down Khalil Pimpleton if he's running loose like he did last week.
Yeah.
Eastern's shown that it doesn't have the speed to keep up with that kind of player. If Central had a lot more Khalil Pimpletons or even 2 Khalil Pimpletons, watch out. But one's already hard to keep up with.
Wouldn't we all love to have 2 Khalil Pimpletons? I mean,
Caleb, game number 2. What are we going to talk about next?
Taking a look at another game that, we've got a heavy favorite coming in, NIU at Western Michigan. NIU last year ended Western's regular season on a really sour, salty note. Huskies found a way to ground out a close win in the cold in DeKalb. Western's returning with a more complete-looking offense, a more dynamic offense, probably a more all-around complete team that looks like they're able to finish things off as we've seen in recent weeks. I mean, is there any reason to think that NIU should be able to keep the game close this time around again or win? Is there any indication you've seen anything of that, Alex?
Not really. I mean, sure, NIU's been putting up a few points here and there. Let's see what they do against Ball State. They put up a fight, 25 points. I don't see NIU putting up the same fight it had against Ball State, against Western, and NIU against Central, only 10 points. Yeah, I think that's more of a truer version of NIU's self, especially in this matchup. I mean, Western's just got too many players. By the time that NIU's Western's done with its first 5 possessions, I think NIU is going to have its hands on its hips. And even if it's not physically exhausted, I mean, just look at the scoreboard. That's just mentally tasking right there.
Yeah, and they are getting production from some of their younger defensive players, but it's really hard for guys like Pugh, who's doing a little bit of everything right now at linebacker, to shoulder the load given what Western's going to be able to throw at them athlete-wise. Western's just going to be – NIU's trotting out guys with potential on the defensive end. Western is trotting out guys who are already polished products or dynamic products. So NIU's going to have some breaks go their way for this to even be a competitive football. I cannot really envision NIU keeping Western under 40 points. I also do not see NIU scoring 40 points. So there's that.
Ball State at Toledo. This is going to be one of the more fun games in the West for sure. If there's any MAC West team that is 2-1 right now and can still win the West, is it one of these 2 teams right here?
It's Toledo, Alex. I think it's Toledo because Toledo's defense is capable of shutting other teams down, and their offense is capable of winning a shootout.
That's more important.
That is more important. But I also have more faith in Toledo's defense to actually shut anybody out whatsoever. I mean, we even just saw Ball State have problems defensively with Toledo, and Ball State have problems with NIU, rather. And Toledo defensively is actually 3rd in the conference in points allowed per game after its effort against EMU. And for whatever struggles the Eagles were having, they were still scoring some points. So, yeah, I mean, I think defensively Toledo heads into this game with the chance to keep Ball State under maybe 30 points. And if that happens, then Toledo's probably going to win. I really don't see Ball State keeping Toledo under 35, 40 points.
Yeah, I think Toledo can win big and win close here, and that's kind of where I'm at. I'm curious to see how much they can slow down Caleb Huntley.
Yeah, and I think Toledo's defense doesn't get as much respect as they probably could. I know it's one thing to watch Western's offense run all over them, but then you get a little bit more down to earth when you watch EMU play them and see that Toledo's very capable. I mean, Terrence Taylor was back this week, played some good ball. They are getting contributions from a lot of guys. And it's not that Ball State couldn't put up some points, just that I trust Toledo to get important stops more than Ball State I ever would trust Ball State to.
Bowling Green's at Ohio. I don't expect I don't know. I mean, I don't expect too much to come out of Bowling Green. But, hey, speaking of coming out of Bowling Green, isn't there some news?
Jordan Strack is tweeted out that somewhere around potentially as much as 16 players suspended for failed drug tests. I mean, for a team that already was struggling to stop anybody, this is going to be Ohio's chance to show that they have an offense that can move the football.
On the football field, that will most definitely affect, Bowling Green. It probably won't affect the scoreboard in terms of who wins, who loses. It might affect the margin, and that's about it. Ohio, I don't know what to expect. I don't know what to expect out of them. I know that they've been practicing all week because they weren't able to play last week. They had one, Frank Solich said, per Jason Arkley's blog, they only had one test. They only had one test come back positive, and they just had to shut things down. They were able to practice all week. So hopefully, I just want to see what Ohio looks like this week, see if they have any different kind of change of mind or state of mind for its offense. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, and for Ohio and Bowling Green, these two teams, they have a history of beating the living snot out of each other. And if it rolls that way this year, then it's in favor of Ohio, because I don't envision any scenario of Bowling Green just absolutely racking it up on Ohio. Ohio's too well coached to let that happen.
Upset of the week, Miami Akron.
That would be something. I mean,
it's not unlikely at this point.
I mean, it feels so much more likely now, given what Buffalo is able to do against Miami's defense, and then also consider, even though the game didn't matter as much at the end of last year, how they kept it close against Miami last year.
Yeah, I didn't realize Akron's rushing offense against Miami's rushing defense would actually be something to look out for here, but here we are. Hop aboard the Tion Dollard hype train. It's fun. It's nice and cozy.
I don't know where Gabbard is versus as far as his health goes, missing essentially the better part of the last two games with a head injury. So we're heading into this game where you're looking at the conversion numbers and the offensive numbers for Miami and Akron, and they're still poor, obviously. But you now trust, given what Tion Dollard's done, Akron to maybe look a little bit better. Maybe tease the secondary finally, and maybe we'll see some big plays from Zach Gibson this week. Maybe this is the week for that to happen. If it doesn't, then Akron's got to do something in the department of creating some turnovers, because even whether it's Gabbard or whether it's Mayer, I would trust Miami to kind of get back in form this week and bounce back from the Buffalo loss, and especially after having to sit on it, not playing the Battle of the Bricks. So for those of you guys who might not be in the know, Alan has covered Kent State for going on a few years, right, Alan?
Actually, this is my second stint. I'm on about 15 years now.
Okay. And then,
Yep.
So where did you make some stops along between the stints here at that paper?
I actually covered Kent from 96 to 02, and then I was actually the sports editor at the Record Courrier for about 3 or 4 years. And then my wife and I had a couple of boys, and I actually was the dreaded stay-at-home mom for several years and just worked part-time. And then I got back to covering Kent State in 2012.
Gotcha. Okay, so so he's been doing that about the time that I was graduating high school, heading into Ohio University, and so Alex and I have followed Alan's reporting over the years. He's given us some good coverage over the basketball team, obviously, and then now things are a little bit more exciting for the football team. They're in a more exciting era. Does that excitement, Alan, that they're having right now, that they're experiencing, does it feel anything similar to what that type of team had?
The 2012 thing, I stumbled back into that after covering them back in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. They had a 6-5 year, and then that was like a miracle back in, I think it was 01. And then I stumbled back in. I couldn't have come at a better time. That year, I just, you just sit there and wonder what's going on. I mean, it's just, I've never seen anything like it. Everything fell into place, and they had some playmakers, and it was really magical. And then right back to the struggles again until they started getting things going last year. And so it's been fun. It's been fun.
Kent's sure having a heck of a lot more fun right now. I mean, like you said a second ago, it's kind of hard to gauge just what everybody's experiencing right now in a COVID year, but the types of things that Kent State's doing on offense this year, how does that even compare to a MAC team that you've seen in the past?
They had some incredible weapons back in 2012 on offense. Dree Archer being the one that, pops in your mind right away. Just incredible speed, incredible quickness, made some plays that you just can't even imagine. I can't say they have a Dree Archer now,
sure,
but boy, they've got so many weapons. I mean, it's unbelievable. They have 3 running backs that are kind of interchangeable. They all do a little bit something different, but they could all be a feature back. There's some wide receivers from last year's team that were making an impact, and you're sitting there thinking, okay, those guys are going to pick up, where they left off or whatever. And some of them have, but others have kind of fallen by the wayside, and other guys have stepped up. The number of playmakers that Coach Sean Lewis has been able to bring in here in this short period of time. I mean, this is his 3rd year. It's really amazing. really amazing, especially at a place like Kent State where their offense, since they had that big year in 2012, has really struggled. I mean, they were among the worst in the nation in scoring and total offense and all those statistics for several years. And then all of a sudden he comes in here and, man, he's managed to turn it around quicker than anybody could have ever imagined. That's for sure.
Yeah, and Kent State, it doesn't have the type of tradition a lot of other MAC schools can lay claim to, but there's still something there, and there's still talent in that region of the state that you can mine. And obviously Sean Lewis has tapped into that. The sky's the limit. And it's almost, as a Kent State fan, you can't sit here and be like, I hope he doesn't get any better because we're going to lose him. But good, that's got to be so exciting just to have a coach that's turned things around such a rapid fashion, because it can only mean that maybe somebody else comes along, even if they lose Coach Lewis, that is going to stick around and keep things going in this right direction. Do you think that might be the mindset of fans right now? Is that a little bit too much of a reach?
They definitely fear losing him. There's no question about that. Daryl Hazel was the last guy that turned it around, and he left for Purdue. It's just kind of the way things go, as you well know, at this mid-major level, that it's a proving ground. And if you can come in and turn a program around like Kent State, you're obviously going to draw some attention. It's a fear, but yeah, exactly like you said, you want to get as much mileage out of them as you can. And they, so far so good. They won a bowl game for the first time in their history last year.
Yep.
3-0 for the first time since 1958. I mean, you can go on and on. I mean, the things that they've accomplished so far. So far, it's been an incredible run. 7 wins in a row. They did that in 2012. I really couldn't tell you before that. I mean, how many years it's been. I've got that in one of my files somewhere. But, yeah, just a lot of things like that have been accomplished that haven't been done here in a long time.
It's incredible. I tuned into the first week like you and just kind of didn't know who some of these guys were. And I watched Marquez Cooper carry the ball like 4 times, and I was like, oh, he's going to be good. Like I didn't have to look up anything, or I was just kind of like, who's this guy? You just have that first time, like, oh, he's going to be good for a few years now. And you have the same thought about Bradford, and he's a load, and some of these young receivers. And I mean, I'm looking back through the Bowling Green stats, and it's just 7 different freshmen or sophomores, I think, with like a catch or 2 catches. And what do you think is the upside for some of these young guys that Lewis is recruiting and that they're developing right now?
You come into this offense, and then the thing he'll tell you is like, if you do what we ask you to do for a period of time, you're going to get a chance. And, he's really held to that. I mean, it really helps, obviously, when you're scoring as many points as they are and you're running as many plays as they are to spread the ball around, because they're running 90 plays a game. So, a lot of people can get opportunities when you're running 90 plays a game, 80 plays a game. So, when things are rolling, and they are, it's a really, really fun system to play in. You don't have to be – you can be selfish to a point. You're going to get yours, but you also obviously want to be a team player and see everybody else get theirs as well. And that's what's happening right now when they get this thing rolling. It's that everybody has a piece. And man, that really breeds a lot of things. It really breeds a lot of unity. Everybody's having fun. You're winning games. Everybody's getting their numbers. I mean, you can't ask for anything better.
We've already kind of I've had the mindset of anything we get is a plus. The games can be canceled any given week. The games could have been sloppy, but instead what we've seen from some teams is Buffalo's looked like world beaters. Western Michigan's looked like they have one of the best offenses in the country. Aside from the first week against EMU, they look like they have one of the best, most proficient FBS offenses. And if it's everything feels like you're tacking on just extra as a MAC fan. So along those lines, how exciting is a game like Buffalo versus Kent State in your mind as someone who's been on the beat a long time?
Well, I mean, the thing I compare it to is the last big regular season game that they've had has had title implications. Is in 2012 they went to Bowling Green and they won a game that clinched the division. They've not played anything remotely close to that. I mean, last year they were 3-6 and they were just playing for their bowl lives, and they ended up winning all those games. The miracle win against Buffalo. So I mean, this is new territory, and they've never played a regular season game anything like this. So the excitement, I mean, this is the game that you point to when you take over, like Sean said. You play yourself into this position, and then now, it's just all about taking advantage of it. But, this is just a monster game for this program. I mean, they have not played many regular season games that meant much for you go back 5 decades. I mean, it's amazing. So this is what it's all about.
Yeah. And so for Kent, I mean, we know Crum's got to be efficient in a game like this. They're going to need big plays, whether it's guys like Isaiah McCoy or whoever it might be. Have you kind of come up with any ideas of whether it's keys or whether it's things that absolutely have to happen for them to be able to put up points and slow down a team like Buffalo?
The one thing that they've struggled to do, since Sean got here is stop the run. I mean, that is it's a focus of his. He understands the importance. It's not like he's trying to win in a different way or anything like that. They had a decent first game against Eastern Michigan this year where they did a pretty good job. But the last 2 games, they've got guys pretty good on the ground. They haven't faced Jared Patterson. This is they've got to somehow find a way to slow him down to some extent. I mean, they're kind of their defense is kind of built different than most. They got 3 linemen everybody's pretty undersized. They kind of rely on speed and athleticism. They try to shoot gaps. They try to take a lot of chances. And, last week, even against Akron, and that Dollar kid's a pretty good player, he exposed them pretty well. He had over 200 yards rushing. So you're sitting there thinking, okay, that kid's good, but he's not Patterson. So they got to figure that out. I mean, they got to, you can just picture kind of Buffalo just kind of, if they do what they want to do, they're going to gouge him on the ground. They're going to keep the ball out of Crum's hands potentially, and that type of thing. And, if you're Kent State, you've got to prove you can keep that from happening to make this a football game.
And so Kent State, I mean, like you said, the run game or stopping the run game is going to be a big key. They don't exactly have a Roosevelt Nix right now, but for people who aren't super familiar with Kent State's defense, who's been making a few of the plays this year, and who do you expect to keep making strides?
They're really a defense that relies on a lot of different people. I would say if you want to start picking some guys out, Keyshawn Gamble is a senior linebacker who's had a really good season so far. He's made a lot of big plays. The problem is they have another inside linebacker named Martin Lawrence Burke, who's he's a really good player, but he's been hurt the last 2 weeks. Keith Sherrill is a safety. He's out for the year. So it's kind of one of them deals where they've just kind of been patching it together a little bit. I would say Zayon West is a defensive end, a senior who's had a big impact so far. He's had a really nice year. They talk about him a lot when they talk about, breaking down film and what people have done. But yeah, they got Elvis Hines in the corner, who is a senior who's played a lot of football for him. Real solid guy. And then they also added 2 guys on the back end that are division, big time FBS transfers, and CJ Holmes. He played Penn State and Notre Dame, and then Tony Butler played at Nebraska. So, those are guys that are, still trying to figure out a little bit with a new team, but obviously guys that can certainly play at this level.
All right. And I think I'd be remiss if I didn't end asking you about, the star of the year so far in Dustin Crum. A lot of people, there's interest from outside the program, obviously, in whether he's an NFL caliber quarterback. And we've seen the efficiency numbers. We've seen the arm strength from time to time, and obviously the connections there with McCoy. But what separates Dustin Crum from past quarterbacks that Kent State has had?
He's really an incredible story. Everybody else has every team has their stories that are just really cool. This guy, when Sean took over, one of the first thing he does is bring in a quarterback, Woody Barrett, who's an Auburn guy that was recruited at Auburn. And you're sitting there thinking, okay, this is his guy. He beat Dustin out that year and ends up being a quarterback, did a pretty good job. And then long story short, Dustin ends up somehow, basically doing everything they asked him to do and winning the job last year in the second game and taking it over, and the rest is history. I mean, he's done an incredible job. Arm strength really wasn't a strength when I first saw him, but all of a sudden, he's really worked hard. He's been in the weight room. He's gotten stronger. He can take more hits. Anybody over at Kent will tell you the biggest thing about him is his leadership. He's an incredible leader. He makes everybody around him better, just like you want a quarterback to do. So things he's been able to do is, if you want to point to one guy, it's been the key. It's obviously him. And when they put him on the field, they feel like they can beat anybody. He's a big guy going into this game, obviously, and no reason to believe he won't play well, because he's played well every time they've really asked him to do something. He's done it. So.
I don't know how comfortable you feel making a prediction, Alan, but if there's a key to winning this football game, what does Kent State got to do to pick up maybe its biggest regular season victory, or one of its biggest regular season victories in school history?
That Jared Patterson can't go crazy. I mean, to say you're going to stop him is just ridiculous, but he can't have one of them 300-yard days and do whatever he wants. They've got to keep him in some sort of check. And then, offensively, I mean, it's not like Buffalo doesn't have a pretty solid defense too. Aside from Patterson, is just look at the trenches. I mean, they've got to be able to hold up. Their offensive line, Kent State has played really well so far. You know, they've got to be able to continue that, and the defensive line has to just be able to hold their own a little bit and at least make things tough for Buffalo. At least have a stalemate in the trenches to give yourself a chance to win the game overall, and then you avoid turnovers and all those other crazy things that can happen in a game like this. And you give yourself a chance to win on the road, and you hope for the best at the end.
Is there anybody that we really haven't spoken a lot about with Buffalo or Kent this year, or maybe even just an X factor type guy that could really make a big difference in this game or could swing something one way or the other?
I think you're going for someone who hasn't really made a name for themselves yet on either roster. But I'm going to give you someone who has made a name for themselves, but I'd like to see maybe a little bit more of, maybe a lot more of. I was surprised to look at the stats and see Kodofi Wright only has 4 tackles for the year. And he has 4 tackles and 5 pass breakups. Isn't that something? I'd like to see, you know, what the situation is there. I'd like to see if he can get into the backfield as much as he did last year, and, you know, have it not be just a Malcolm Kuntz show back there. I think that's kind of where, like, a difference maker has to come through for Buffalo to win the game that they need to.
Sure, and we've seen Kodofi Wright make a big play, pick 6 against NIU. He's definitely shown himself being versatile enough to make plays, and I don't think he doesn't have to be the guy who even has 5-6 tackles a game if he's making plays in other ways.
He doesn't, but, like, also just, like, you know, looking for his own personal pro prospects moving forward, this is kind of that it'd be nice for him to have some film on. For sure, and I think if we're looking at somebody from Kent State who could make a play in a game like this, Gamble's a pretty easy choice if you just wanted to just come up with somebody, but I think Gamble's a safe bet, yeah.
Yeah, but I think Brandon Coleman would be a good choice for this week because he's another guy who hasn't received a little bit as much attention as Gamble has for Kent State, and obviously Kent State's defense has to come up with some big plays, so he's another guy that could get in the backfield and kind of mess things up for Van Treese and for the Buffalo run game. So I'm curious to see if someone like he could, you know, make a big play.
Last episode, we talked about the best offensive players the MAC has to show right now. We narrowed the list to 5 to show off. Defense, that list was hard to narrow down to 5, so it's as long as 7 right now. We kind of talked about how generally the talent's just better in the MAC, but it's because it was just so damn hard for us to narrow down this list on this side of the ball. There's a lot of playmakers on defense.
Yeah, and it's hard to sometimes, like, it's easy to rely on the stats defensively when you aren't focusing on it. And there are guys who are going to have 30 tackles that probably shouldn't be on this list and that we didn't put there. And there are guys who maybe have 15, 16 tackles, and they've undoubtedly made the type of impact that you need to have a team that has, there's obviously a couple people come to mind, but yeah, there's a couple guys who just, the stats don't wow you, but you know they're standouts. They're spectacular.
When I asked you who in your mind was the best defensive player, who the MAC defensive player of the year is so far in your mind, who was the name that came to your mind?
For me, it was really quickly Malcolm Kuntz of Buffalo. And knowing the number of guys that kind of are capable of doing stuff there, you know that not necessarily are they going to have ridiculous stats, but Kuntz does come in, 17 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, a pass breakup. He made things he disrupted things a little bit for AJ Mayer against Miami. And that was, his defensive effort was as big a part of anything of making Miami's offense just look plain bad. So there are other guys I think of that kind of pop up in mind, but Kuntz is the one that goes to the top right away.
Yeah, you and I agree there. Like, Malcolm Kuntz is kind of my favorite right now too, because he's made so many plays, doing versatile things. Bob Arslanian's been doing really good. He's defending the neck roll incredibly well. 34 tackles, 20 solo. And 20 solo helps lead the conference. Terry Myrick at Eastern. We don't do enough Eastern propaganda in here. So here we go with Terry Myrick. 34 tackles, 2.5 for loss, a pass breakup, a forced fumble, and a recovery. That's good stuff. Ryan McWood. A lot of people will remember he had the key interception to cap off the win against Ball State.
Mm-hmm.
He has 28 tackles. Remember, only 2 games.
And he's another one of those guys who, not a lot of fanfare when he joined the program, comes in, makes his mark, and now he's an all-MAC caliber guy who they rely on big time. And, he's the type of guy who kind of embodies a lot of the walk-on hype about MAC football, and because he is one of those guys.
Brandon Martin, he leads the conference with 37 tackles, so we kind of have to throw him in there. Oh man, we have to have the most tackles for a defensive player.
I was hesitant with that because I think Ball State Uzodinma is the guy that stands out for me the most, but Ball State's had so much trouble that I can understand saying, hey, here's the guy who's just been all over the place, but it's hard to say I've seen anything that makes me think, wow, he's amazing. But
Uzodinma's done really well for himself. He had the one pick six last week, and he's done well for himself. You know, you don't have to make interceptions to have defensive plays.
Right.
You can have pass breakups.
Troy Hairston as well for Central Michigan. He hasn't necessarily, I mean, even being like, you look at him and he just looks like a really big outside linebacker, but he's kind of been more in the backfield out of a stand-up defensive end spot some, and he's got 17 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, forced fumble. He's just living in the backfield. He's just a chunky dude, man. Like, he's like 5'11", 245, and just comes off the edge hard, makes a lot of plays, gets his hand in on there, a lot of tackles that he's not really a part of too. So he's done some really impressive stuff. And there's some other guys for Central Michigan, but I think for now, Harrison makes the most sense.
Yeah, I mean, he leads the league with 7 tackles for loss. So
for me, the other person who stood out as when I thought player of the year was Western's A.J. Thomas. And I think that there are guys like Ali Fayyad and Ralph Hawley that maybe are possibly more talented, but Thomas is the one who's making things happen. And he has 21 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, an interception, a pass breakup. He had the pick, he's had a pick 6 this year. He's in the backfield. He's making plays in the secondary. So Thomas has just been getting it done all over the place. And he's the one who's always, I mean, you're just hearing his name. So he's that guy who's just been dynamic in so many ways.
Who's someone, let's close this up. Who's someone that's not on this list of 7 players that we have that you would probably consider on here? I know you said AJ Uzodinma, but who's another a depth piece for the Max defensive stars?
I think Kyle Pugh, honestly, because without Kyle Pugh, NIU's defense would be the undisputed worst in the conference, potentially. But he's still finding a way to rack up a ton of tackles, and I have to imagine that those younger defensive players are benefiting a lot from having him around. And like, props to him for sticking it out for essentially 6 years and battling through injuries and still playing at the level he's playing at. But he's just not going to get a lot of attention unless his stats go sky high because NIU's defense has been so poor.
Yeah, that's true. But you failed to recognize the point that I said earlier, which is that we need more EMU propaganda on the show. Saran Rush is your sack leader with 3.5.
I think most years we would have we would have people that we would look at and we would say, these guys have absolutely dominated. And this year I feel like Coons is the only one I feel that strongly about.
Caleb, we talked about the games. We talked about what we expect. We talked about some individuals that have stood out at the midway point. But now we have to move forward. Let's quickly go through our picks. We're going to do them quicker than we usually do them. One by one, who's going to win each game? Central, Eastern. I'm going to go with Eastern here.
I've got Central. I think that the offense scores a little bit too much for Eastern to keep up.
NIU, Western. Western's the easy pick here.
Yeah,
Western by a lot.
No way NIU can keep up offensively.
MAC West game of the week, maybe? Ball State Toledo? I don't know who I got. I'm going to let you go first.
I would love to see a shootout, but I think Toledo's going to slow Ball State down a little bit this week, and I've got the Rockets.
Yeah, as do I. I think it'll be like a 31-24 affair. Ohio BG. Ohio's going to win, right?
Yeah.
Miami, Akron. Let's go Zips. Let's go Zips.
I mean, I'm only picking Miami because coming off of the extra time, that they're going to be a little more motivated to come back in here and be a little bit more focused. They've had more time to prepare for Akron, to prepare for Dollard. So I pick Miami just because of what they've got in place already. They're gonna look better this week, a lot better.
You're right. That's not convincing enough. Let's go Zips. MAC game of the week.
Game of the week.
Kent State at Buffalo. I hadn't really thought too much about this until just now. I know I've been kind of excited about it, but I never really thought about who my winner is going to be. This is going to be hard. This is not going to be easy. I think Kent State's O-line is going to be a huge factor here. Kent State's O-line is very, very experienced. We haven't said that enough. There's nothing but juniors and seniors on that O-line. It's good. They've been giving Dustin Crum a crap ton of time. They've been giving the running backs a crap ton of room.
Where do you stand? Okay. I'm going Buffalo just because I think that we're going to finally see Crum trip up a little bit. And I don't think it's because he's like falling to the moment. I just think that Buffalo is more prepared to make more game-breaking plays. And I think that they're going to pick off a couple deep balls, whether they're thrown to McCoy or Pokey. And when Kent State tries to keep things happening through the air, at big moments, Buffalo's going to make the plays that make the difference.
That's kind of where I'm at. We're going to find ourselves into a shootout situation in two different styles, right?
Yeah.
But I'm going to go with Kent State.
I'm
going to go with Kent State, and
so
it'll be decided by a missed PAT.
This is the game where Dustin Crum cements himself as MAC Offensive Player of the Year, yes?
This is the game where Marquez Cooper cements himself as a MAC Freshman of the Year.
Oh, I like that. I'm fine with Buffalo winning and that happening because I love Marquez Cooper.